My guest on the show today is my friend, Dr. Ellen Wong, and this is the last time I'm going to call you doctor.
Totally cool.
Totally cool. You can see she's a doc. We're going to talk about this. She is a naturopathic doctor and an interesting title, a chief happiness officer, CHO. I'm going to call you Ellen Wong, CHO. We're going to talk about what that means. Ellen, I'm so glad we're making this happen. So great to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really honored to be considered a cool person to be on your podcast.
We'll see by the end of the conversation whether you pass the bar and we release it.
This episode never gets aired.
We'll just share it with our mutual friends and they'll be like, oh my gosh, it's hilarious. It's good. So this is an episode, and my listeners know sometimes I interview people I've never met until we show up on those. Sometimes I interview some of my best friends, or I interviewed my wife, who I know extremely well. Ellen, I would say we've spent maybe a day in a room together, but we didn't really connect. And then we decided we needed to connect. And then I think we've had a couple hours of conversations, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is one of my people. I think we have a very similar viewpoint on the world and similar lifestyle with a family and busy East Coasters. You're not really an East Coaster, but you're an Eastern time zone person, as we'll talk about that. So so I'm really excited. Ellen is just a awesome person to talk to. I mean, anybody chief happiness officer, who doesn't want to hear about that? So Ellen, first of all, where are you in the world today? And then we're going to get into a fun chat.
I'm based in Eastern Standard Time Zone, so Toronto, Canada, and it's been fun hanging out. I mean, you and I met through a mastermind group, and I love that. I think I might one of two Canadians in this group. And
really,
I very recently in our last meetup learned about this concept of Venmo, which is like
wow.
We don't have Venmo in Canada, as I discovered on said trip. But here's the bonus of this entire trip and me not having Venmo is I didn't pay for a single meal.
Oh my gosh, that's so perfect.
Right?
No wonder you're happy. I would be happy too, because when I went to lunch with my group, I definitely paid.
Yeah, I tried.
Somebody.
I actually tried, and we couldn't make it happen. It was very funny. Like even like we tried to use my credit card at one point in time, and the machine wouldn't process it because do you guys have to punch in your zip code to use your credit card or something like that?
No, not at a restaurant. I mean, you do when you pay online, but not when you're.
I have no idea what happened at that restaurant, but it only allowed a zip code and no other thing. And we don't have zip codes in Canada either. So like I tried so hard to pay it. It still didn't work. And then I was like, all right, well, thank you everyone for this entire trip.
Yeah. You know, what's going to be a good payback? We can all come and do it in Canada and then none of us work. And we had to pay for a bunch of people versus us paying for you.
It's fine. We'll have to
run it by our mutual person. Yeah.
Yes, I would love to have you all up here.
I think I've told you this when we met, but I'm a honorary Canadian. I'm from Minnesota originally. And I said, this is yet another reason why being a Canadian is awesome. I have a couple of clients that are Canadian. I do work with a couple of Canadian companies, Minnesota, similar culture. And also now to know that you can come to the US and not have to pay your own bills. That's amazing.
Yeah. This is my secret. Don't air this episode.
This is it.
Maybe cut out this chunk. This is
yeah. Sorry. Edit this out.
Yeah.
All right.
This is my secret to a happy life.
So Ellen, other than not paying for bills, what else do you nerd out about, or what's something that you nerd out about?
Well, I mean, with the title Chief Happiness Officer, I think we're pretty safe to assume that one thing that I have done massive amounts of deep dives in different aspects and perspectives is this whole idea of happiness. And I I say this a lot, and it's this idea that happiness is probably the most fundamental human goal. It's it's universal, right? All cultures, all people around the world want to feel happier. And yet almost everyone I have asked and talked to about this, no one grew up actually learning or speaking about this idea of happiness and what it actually means. Which then means most of us then default to letting society tell us what path we're supposed to take. And so I mean, going through my own journey around this, I think it's interesting and an issue that the single most fundamental human desire is something we never talk about.
I have enough questions in my head right now to fill up the rest of this podcast with no more of my scripted questions. So I'm going to reserve a couple of these because so we'll have to have you come back on and we're just going to have a discussion just about this topic, which I know we're going to do today, but I have so many questions and I'm going to reserve them. Okay. So you're nerd out about happiness. I completely agree with you. And I don't ever remember a primary education or a higher education class around how to be more happy in life. I remember how to do things like accounting, which I was like, this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And skills based, and I think we'll get into this further, but do you see being happy as a skill that you can improve upon and work towards? Like something that you can actually get better at?
Yes. It's I think one misconception around happiness is that it is somehow a balance between positive and negative emotions. And it's actually not. Like positive and negative emotions are part of the experience of happiness, but happiness is actually so much more than that, and so many more things from an individual level to a societal to a global level can affect how happy we feel. And so to me, it's a skill that can be acquired and improved upon should you choose to do so on an individual level. But even from like a societal level, like one of the determining factors in how happy someone rates themselves is whether they trust their government. And so I mean, we won't dive into a political conversation right now, given the landscape of everything going on.
Talk about the thing that makes almost nobody happy is to get into a deep political. Like, if we want to go no happy, no matter where you are and anywhere in the political spectrum, let's just bring it up, and then we're going to go not happy.
Yeah, but it's interesting, like trust in government, and I think that's key, right? Like, do you trust the people leading you to make decisions that take care of you? Is essentially what that is about. And I find it fascinating. Like something, and so to answer your previous question, which is like, is it a skill that can be acquired? I think it is on so many levels. And I think governments that truly act on the well-being of their people, the people just do better. And they're all happier. And interestingly enough, their economy does better too. Because who drives the economy? The people.
The people.
Exactly.
Are we speaking about Finland now, which I believe was just rated the happiest country in the world again a few weeks ago by whoever?
Yeah, 6 years.
Is it the World Economic Forum or something? Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
What a great marketing tool.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. It's actually
where is America on that list? Do they rank like all countries? I haven't. Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to assume you looked at it. Where is the United States on that list? I mean, like generally
15. No, I actually want to say I'm actually fairly certain it was, because Canada, I believe, was 13, and I think US was 15. Yep. I'm actually looking. I made an Instagram post about this. I'm just flipping through to make sure I'm quoting the exact number, but yeah, 15. And the reason why US is actually higher on that list along with Canada, even though I think like if you actually survey people, they may not feel as happy, is that in this particular ranking system, they take things into account like GDP. And so countries that are economically doing better will rank a little bit higher on that list. But it's interesting.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So,
and I made an executive host producer decision. We're just going to continue down this path. I think there's so many things that I want to ask you about. Part of being happy is feeling satisfied. Mm-hmm. For me, like my experience, and part of being satisfied is, for example, a basic need is met. I don't have to worry that I'm going to have a full belly and I'm going to feel hydrated. So that would make sense. Yeah. That a significant portion of a country or the fact that you live in Toronto, I live in New York City. Hey, do I want something? I can order it on Amazon. Mm. So that makes me look kind of happy because I don't have to like waste my time. One of our mutual, I think you know him, somebody in my mastermind, he's the CEO of the Ugandan Water Project. He's telling us about how their mission is to have more clean water in Uganda, and that some people in Uganda, depending on where you are, have to walk 4 to 5 miles each way with buckets on their shoulders to have enough water to basically stay alive.
Yeah. Yep.
And they do. And one day a week, one of the children from the school has to do that, or what from each class has to do that. So they miss their education.
Yeah.
That would not create a high level of happiness because their basic needs aren't. Correct. It takes a lot of work to have your basic needs met.
Yes, I agree. And so, I mean, if we want to deep dive into this whole, like, why do certain countries rank a certain way, this report is really based on 6 major factors. One is social support, which I think is interesting, because I think in that particular scenario you just described, they may actually rank higher on the social support than we do, because they feel like they support each other. Do you know what I mean? Like, they connect to the people around them. So social support is one. Yeah. A healthy life expectancy is another one, and that probably then puts this exact same example you use, like people in Uganda have a lower healthy life expectancy than we do. And so, yeah, if you're worried about your child living or not because of, dirty water, then like your happiness level isn't going to be as high. GDP is obviously like one of the factors. Generosity of the people around you is another factor. Freedom to make life choices is a big one. And perception of corruption.
I'm gonna get into a little bit of more of the studies around this. Do you know Geert? I think it's Geert Hofstede's 6 Dimensions of Culture. It's a study. It's the 6 basic issues that society has to come to terms with to organize itself. So these dimensions, and I can send you this, but the dimensions are, and they rank countries by this, and I would be so fascinated to see how this relates to the happiness. The first one is collective, and each of these is a paradigm. So it's collectivism versus individualism. US and Canada, and Australia and Western Europe, individualism versus collectivism. The distance to power. So this is generally what kind of governmental authority. So places like the distance that you feel as an individual to the power structure. So again, US and Canada, we feel close because we get a chance to pick our leaders.
Yep.
Places like Russia and China would be far away. Femininity, masculinity. And which, like, not the actual masculine or feminine, but the energy around that, like the doing versus the more things. Uncertainty avoidance. Which is the autonomy that you mentioned before and the freedom. So US and Canada, we have a pretty high level of uncertainty. We don't avoid it that much because we feel safe. Places like Russia, high level of uncertainty avoidance.
Yep.
And then the last 2 dimensions are long-term versus short-term, which I would guess would directly relate to your level of happiness, is being able to look at long-term and go, hey, like I'm taken care of. And then the last one is, which I think is arguably maybe the one that's most, is indulgence.
Oh.
Hey, I want something. I'm going to go get it. Yeah. US, Canada, Australia, Brazil, Mexico, high level of indulgence. Places like Eastern Europe, Russia, China, low level of indulgence. It's more about purely surviving as a basic structure. So I can send you this, but I would love to see how this maps to.
Yeah. I feel like that would be a really interesting comparison. Do you want to hear another nerdy topic around this that I compared?
Love to. We're here to get nerdy and
yeah.
Go ahead.
What were you gonna say? Medical background. So I actually wanted to take a look at the happiest countries on earth and whether that correlated in any way to antidepressant use. So I took a look at this data and I was very surprised, but then dug in to actually explain it. I was very surprised to see that a lot of Nordic countries that rank highest on the world happiness scale also are high consumers of antidepressant medication. So hear me out for a second, because it seems contradictory.
Yeah. I'm actually not surprised by that at all.
Why would you say that?
Yeah, well, since we're having this conversation, I'm not surprised by that because, one, I can, using medicine, potentially raise the level to a level that I feel more comfortable with. I think the general understanding, and I'm stealing this from you, which I think you're going to talk about, is like, if you're like being on an antidepressant isn't going to make you happy. However, what it can do is bring you to a level where you feel like you are better at coping or adjusting and all those things. So I'm actually not surprised, Ellen, because Scandinavian countries, US, Canada, the fact that if you feel that way, you can do something about it that doesn't require you to do hard work, quite frankly, and that it's probably affordable if you have decent, in like Canada, you have like state healthcare. I think most of the Scandinavian countries, it would make sense. You go, hey, you know what? Like things are going pretty well, but I'm also feeling this way. Let me just go take care of it medically or chemically. So I'm not, I'm not surprised by that. So yeah, sorry. I was just that you asked me, so I'm giving you my,
and you you've pretty much nailed like most of that idea. So I think one of the first things we actually have to sort of talk through is the fact that whenever anybody, like if, and this is antidepressant in this case, but even if you were to look at any other measure, if it is a measure of like a use of something, an intervention or a tool or a strategy, you need to first have access to it. So first and foremost, antidepressant use is a measure of antidepressant access. So countries that have drug shortages obviously do not have a high antidepressant use. So that's one thing. Second is exactly what you said, which is like they have to feel empowered to seek this out. Now, in this particular scenario, all antidepressants, majority of countries in the world, you have to see a doctor to get it prescribed, which means they feel comfortable going to their doctor and talking about it and asking for support. So when I compare data for countries where speaking about mental health is still a little bit more taboo, it's a little bit more difficult. So countries a lot of times in Asia, for example, countries like Korea and Japan have a very low antidepressant use. They also have a very high suicide rate. What does that tell you? It tells you that they may not be in a situation where it is easy for them to go and speak to someone and get access to this medication. Now, in the Scandinavian countries, just like you said, healthcare is at least somewhat subsidized, if not fully subsidized, which means I'm not feeling great. I have someone I trust and can provide me a resource. It is also something that the government provides for me because they're taking care of me. And I find that you're right. Like sometimes there is like a need to take an antidepressant. And the fact that you can get support around that makes you feel happier. And it may not have a lot to do with the actual chemical that you're taking inside the drug. It's just a simple idea that your society is set up to support you when you need.
Yeah. And the autonomy that you have to do that. The access, and also, like if I want to go and do this thing and get this thing, there's actually nothing wrong with it. And that I can surround, and there are still areas of the United States, certain area, like not even areas, just certain people would go, like I don't need therapy, I don't need coaching, I don't need medicine. Like, that's taboo. Fine. My grandparents probably would have been the people that have been like, what do you need that for? You work it out yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but the fact that we also, like I'd say like Western civilization, we get probably more of a chance to choose who we surround ourselves with. If you have to walk to go get water, or you're dealing with some basic needs, you're probably not going to have conversations on a podcast about how to be happier.
Yeah.
That's not like what you're going to be spending your time doing. Yeah. That is really fascinating. We're going to put any of the stats that you have, and I know you have some things to share with the audience. We'll put that in the show notes as well. So I think this is really interesting for people to just take a look at if they like this sort of things. It's funny that where I brought up stats, because I love stats to the point where I don't have to do any math myself, where I'm like, that's so interesting. And then I want somebody else who's more scientific and has a lens or enjoys, like, well, let me correlate the data. Like, I just don't care. I want to read the data. I like to read the data and be like, how can I make this useful for me or my clients? I am not the person to like correlate the data. So maybe that's you, but maybe that's somebody else. But I'm looking forward to reading what you come out with, the next things you come out with around things. I like to talk about it on my podcast where No,
I actually think it's interesting. So I have a research background, like a medical background and a research background. So I nerd out a lot about like the studies, because I feel like, news headlines is marketing, right? So it's really easy to just take something and turn it into a headline. And then when the context gets taken out of context, I actually react sort of what you were saying. It's like, if it's taken out of context and it's not useful for my clients, I actually want to know, like, where is this coming from and how do I actually use it? And so part of my job for a very long time in some of my other roles was to take research and make it accessible for people who aren't research oriented to read it and understand it and be able to apply it to whatever it is that they need to use it for. So yes, hence the nerding out and the geeking out.
Yeah. I nerding out and geeking out means you know a lot about something is generally what it means, which is good. So you're a parent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a parent as well. I think our kids are similar in age or younger, on the younger side, right? Like how old are your children?
So I have one. My daughter's 3 and a bit.
3 and a bit, right? So you've got a little human who you could not have this conversation quite yet around happiness because her happiness relies on getting whatever she wants whenever she wants it, most likely. Getting her needs met with no ability to filter any of it.
Yeah.
We have that's right. We have our son is 2.5. What's your stance as a mother around like educating her around this as she gets older? She can start to understand that a lot of it is, and this is my stance as a parent too, your happiness, most of it needs to be generated by you as an individual, not you as a parent, like ourselves. Because you rely on the world and your parents and your significant other to generate your happiness, you will likely be, or the government or entertainment, all the different things that people go, oh, that makes me happy. Yeah, for a time. But I would say that you probably would say this to all of your clients, was my guess, that your happiness has to be, some of it has to be generated internally. Because everything else is going to disappoint you at some point. I mean, like that's at least the way I see it. So how do you, as a parent, how do you look at supporting her as she grows up and like having her learn these things? Because you know she's not going to be taught this in school. But yeah, I'm just curious, what's your perspective on this as any other parents listening? Like, what should we know about this to raise children that are good at being happy for themselves?
Yeah. Without explicitly saying this to her, because obviously she's way too young to understand any of this in this context, but I often go back to the framework that I use to think about happiness. And so I call it 9 pillars of happiness. It's the acronym happiness itself. And it's sort of this 9 fundamental things that I think we need to think about if we want to elevate our happiness. There are probably a ton of high achievers listening to this podcast, and there are going to be people in here who are perfectionists. You cannot perfect happiness. Okay. You cannot overachieve, like put that, I know, sorry, Jason. Like
no, disappointing.
You can't do that. But the way I look at it is like, these are the 9 things that I always go back to reevaluate if I am not feeling as happy as I would like to be. Like there's gotta be one, it typically is at least one of these 9 things is off. And then I kind of go, okay, well, of those 9 things, like, what do I have the energy to attend to right now? Because sometimes life happens and you don't actually have the energy to solve the problem. So like, what can you attend to? And so these are the 9 things that I am already starting to reinforce with her, obviously at a level that she understands. And I'll briefly share them with everyone here. If you follow along, the word is happiness. And so the H stands for health. Right? We try to teach her that like she's eating something because it's healthy, not because mom and dad want her to eat it or whatever. So now she's already starting to be like, what vitamins are in my banana? Like she like is starting to like want to know these things.
What a little future potentially healthcare professional. My daughter's never asked that.
I have no idea. I think it's because we give her supplements at night. So she's kind of like, actually she goes, what supplement is in banana? I'm like, vitamin. You mean vitamin? Like,
that's great.
That's fine though. But like, so H stands for health and, you know, physical and mental health, obviously. A stands for authenticity, like allowing her to sort of express her personality and just be herself and the things that she wants. And within reason, obviously, like if she wants to run across the street in traffic, that's not going to happen. But like just allowing her to express herself, right? So A is living an authentic life. The first P is purpose, like having a sense of purpose. She's too young for this, but I try to cultivate it in having her like feel the sense of awe and like gratitude in the things that she has. And like, you know, we take time to actually explore some of this stuff again at a level she understands. The second P is productivity. I don't define productivity as doing as much as you can in the least amount of time possible. I define it as how do you control your use of time towards what matters. And again, right now it's like me modeling to her that like she gets dedicated time with me. There's no phone, there's nothing else. Like we just sit down, we play, do the things that matter for her right now. The I in happiness stands for inner peace. And so this is where the mindset, the negative self-talk, like, comes in. The N stands for nature. So just spending quality time in nature, but then also protecting nature as a responsibility that we have. And so we teach her like recycling and like that kind of stuff. E stands for emotional mastery. And if anybody has a toddler, this is that age where all the emotions come out and there's no hindrance. And so we're learning to label emotions and what they mean and how do we like resolve it if we feel a certain way. The first S stands for social connection. Play dates and all that kind of stuff so that she knows how to interact with other people. And then the last S stands for sustainability, which again, to me is like a personal level. It's like making sustainable decisions, but then also sustainability on a global level, which goes back to that nature thing, protecting the earth, because that's our responsibility. And so these are like small things that I just kind of infuse into her day. And I want to make sure that I always sort of bring it back to one of these things when I'm explaining, or if I'm focusing on something, I want her to understand that these are the things that are going to help her grow up to be a happier human being, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Ellen. I was just thinking
that was a lot. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just thinking about it as a parent, and my guess is anybody else listening who has children I'm thinking about the intentionality that some of that takes, but some of it doesn't. Meaning that, well, like it's all as parents, I do believe we want to be intentional in some ways. But what I heard a lot of that is just creating an experience with her to model it. Like modeling the thing, and it's not always like you have to spend time with them, but just modeling. Like I love the thing about the food, like healthy, like, oh, why are you eating that? Not because that's how a lot of people raise their kids. Are like, well, you're going to eat this because this is what we're having. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's bad. It's more like, oh, like this is why, because it's healthy. And when you make these choices, what's going to be healthy? My other question I had is, I'm going to make an assumption here. How hard did it have to get for you to understand these concepts? And I say that, Ellen, because most people that I know that I work with, have on the podcast, they had to go through some stuff in order to come out on the other side and go, oh, now I understand this. We don't need to go into details if you don't want to, but my assertion would be that you had to learn this the hard way.
For sure. Before I answer that question, can I just go back one question before that? And you were saying about
you don't even need to ask permission. You can you just go on back. No permission needed.
The whole health thing. I love that you brought that example up, because yes, she does actually eat what we eat, and sometimes she asks for something different. And here's how I'll like use this framework to explain it. I explain to her the health benefits of why we're eating certain things, but then sometimes she asks me to make something different, and I go back to that sustainability pillar, which is I can't continuously cook multiple meals to make this work for her. So I explain that to her. I'll be like, Mommy has a lot of work today. I only could cook this one meal, so that's what we're going to have. When we finish dinner and we take a break and you need something else, I can find time to make another thing for you. And it's honoring my own sustainability, because I cannot possibly cook multiple meals every day to satisfy what she needs on a whim, right? And so that's what I mean. Like, it's a framework that I always go back to. Like, and she now learns. Like, she will ask me, like, she'll be like, can I have this? And I'll be like, can we wait? And she's like, is it because you're tired? Did you have a lot of work today? And like, she's understanding. Like, and it's now compassion and it's kindness. And so when I feel like when I always go back to that idea and that framework, it makes explaining it to her easier. And I hope, fingers crossed, she's going to grow up to understand these concepts and be like a kind, compassionate human being, because she's understanding, like, it's not because I don't want to, or like because I'm angry at you, or like, it's none of those things. It's what is actually the thing is because I can't keep up doing that, if that's the pattern, you know?
Ellen, I would say the fact that you have a 3.5-year-old who's already asking the reason why a thing is no is setting you all up for a lot of success. That is, I look at that, that's like a parenting cheat code, because how many I'm thinking about my kids, but even like me, even as an adult, I'm like, no, I kind of want that thing now. like, oh, like that's going to affect somebody else. Oh yeah. Okay. But yeah, I still want it, you know, like man, this is so cool. That's so cool.
Okay, go back to. I'm gonna go back to answering your question about how we got.
Yeah, now we're gonna get into the real therapeutic part. What's all the demons that you have? No, we don't need the demons.
Many.
But I'm just but I'm really curious. I think the more general way to say this, like, I'd love to hear, in the next 15 minutes before we wrap up today, like a little bit about your journey, because I'm always so fascinated. You're a doctor, which doesn't even imply, it is factual that you've spent a lot of time, energy, likely money on a very specific skill set. And at some point you obviously realize that this wasn't it for you. The only thing, like, it is something you do, but you're like, oh, I have a calling for something else. So I'm really curious about your journey towards your own happiness.
Yeah. So fast forward to the trigger point where this all happened was that I, at one point, was disowned by my family. So we talk about how we got there.
What does that mean, disowned?
It means that I was completely cut off financially, emotionally, contact-wise. Like, it was just we don't like the decision you made, so you're not a part of this anymore. And so that actually means that I missed a whole bunch of, like, my grandmother's birthdays. My cousin got married and she tried to invite me, and that did not work out well in the family. Yeah. My grandmother had a stroke and fell down the stairs, and one of my cousins had to call me, and he was basically sort of the adults in the generation above were like, we don't want her there. And then my cousin was like, she's like the only doctor. So if there's one person we're calling, she is coming to the hospital. Like, what is wrong with you people? And so like it got to that point, right? And so and so when that was obviously a big triggering moment. And if you grow up in an Asian family, it's a very like enmeshed culture. And so I saw my aunts and uncles every weekend. Like it's so when that gets all taken away from you, on top of the fact that I no longer had financial support, and I just I hadn't even graduated yet. I was close to graduating, I think. Medical school is expensive. And so there's a lot of like debt that I have to like deal with and whatnot. So I was in a really bad personal situation. I'll say that. And it was so bad that it was crippling anxiety, crippling depression. And I, as a naturopathic doctor, am someone who's trained to do a lot more like natural health products, supplements, lifestyle things. I couldn't even start. It was so bad. So I had anti-anxiety medication. I had antidepressant medication. It definitely, like you said earlier, got me to the point where I could actually now do the things that I was trained to do in the field that I am in. And I remember the pivotal moment with my family doctor where we were now weaning me off medication. And he was like, oh, like, you're great. You're good. And I was like, I'm not good. And he's like, why not? Like, in medicine, when you diagnose anxiety and depression, it's a checklist. And if you score below a certain number, you're not anxious and you're not depressed. But it says nothing sort of on the opposite end of that. And so my sort of quote that I always say a lot of is like, medications will take you from negative to neutral, but a pill cannot take you from neutral to happy. And that's like literally my biggest realization at that moment in the doctor's office, where he was like, what do you mean you're not good? I'm like, he was kind of like, what are you hoping to feel kind of thing. He literally was like implying that. And I was like, I'm not anxious. I'm not depressed, but I honestly thought I would be happy by now. And he looked at me and was like, well, you know what they say, happiness comes from within. And then like patted me on the shoulder and told me if I wanted to book another appointment to restart meds, I could. And I was kind of like in this zone of disbelief as I drove home, being like, wait, what? Like it just kind of all hit me. Like I was quote unquote just given a clean bill of health, but it is not how I wanted to feel. Right. And so it was that day that then I visited the other doctor, like Dr. Google, who also was not very helpful in this whole realm. It was that day, like that night, I was like, I'm going to figure this out. And I don't know what this means. I don't know, like, what that journey is going to look like, but it's like, I don't buy it. Like, I don't buy that all I could get from my doctor was like, well, you're not sick anymore, so you're good. And then Google being like, happiness happiness depends on you. Like, you could choose happiness. I'm like, I can't freaking choose happiness. I don't even know what to choose from. Like, what does that even mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's like,
such crap.
what does that actually mean? That was literally like, I'm going to solve this. And so to solve it, the first thing I did was go into research because that's my background. And that was the easiest thing to dive into first. And then I was like, I academically understand happiness. Now I wanted to experience it.
Yeah.
So then I traveled to the world's happiest countries to just immerse myself a little bit in their culture and kind of be like, I don't know, like what, I don't know, why are you so happy? Like, what does that all feel like? And like, I actually wanted to
that sounds
feel
amazing.
it. Yeah. I wanted to feel it. Like I wanted to know what this means. And probably the interestingly enough, like the country that really like kind of solidified my understanding of happiness was Bhutan, which is not actually high on that happiness ranking, but they are counted. Like they are, I don't know how to say it, but like they're described as the happiest country on earth because
it's a small country in Southeast Asia.
It's in the Himalayan mountains. Yeah.
No, that's what. Yeah. Yeah. No, not Southeast. So it's like Middle Asia.
Yeah. And basically they have something called the Gross National Happiness Index. And they use it like the census to measure the happiness of its citizens. And they actually hire statisticians and like psychologists and researchers to help them develop this like index. And the reason they actually aren't ranking that high on that World Happiness Report, the one we referred to at the very beginning of this episode, is that they don't care about their GDP. They have made a decision that they care more about the well-being of their citizens than progressing on that economic ladder in the world. And so on that World Happiness Report, they don't rank that high. But in terms of the people there, like, I mean, I spent like a week there. It was just so different. Like they just live life differently. And I was like, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why a country like the United States or Canada may not be able to do that. I may not want to do that. And that's fine. Yeah. Like it's not about replicating Bhutan. But it did show me what life could be like if people focused on happiness and well-being. And it was, I mean, I have tons of stories about Bhutan, but I mean, one of the things that really stuck to my mind was because they're in the Himalayan mountains, the roads are very slippery. They're all around mountainsides. And the first time there is a snowfall, the whole country shuts down because the government doesn't want people driving around the mountainside. They have rails, all mountains. And so for safety, they just shut down the whole country and people just kind of hang. It doesn't matter if there's a project, the government has like building a building. They're like, it doesn't matter that there's a deadline. It's like, no, everybody needs to stay safe. Everybody needs to stay home until the snow like melts and you guys can get back to work. And so in Canada, when we have a snow day, everybody turns on Netflix and sits on the couch and like watches TV or whatever. There, like there's adults having snowball fights like just across the street with each other, and they're like running into their houses and grabbing umbrellas and like creating like shields. And I was just sitting there I really just sat there and witnessed it, and I'm like, this is very different. Like their mindset and their life is just very different. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. But I never would have guessed you were going to say Bhutan.
Yeah.
Like if that was a Jeopardy question, I don't think anybody would like what country has the gross national happiness index. I don't think anybody would guess unless you studied this. Yeah. That's really fascinating. What a great trip. Before we wrap up today, I want you to give us some of your wisdom around like what can people do in terms of, and you've got the happiness framework. Mm-hmm. Before you do that, like any other surprises around countries you visited?
I remember going to, it was it was either Finland or Denmark, where there's pictures of this. It's pretty iconic. There's like restaurants and then there's baby strollers with babies in them.
Oh yeah.
Outside the restaurant. Yeah. And the parents are inside. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't a parent then, but now that I am, I was like I would never consider leaving my child in a stroller outside a restaurant as I'm sitting inside having brunch. Like, first of all, someone would call the police on me, like 100%. Like, yeah. Child services is coming and knocking on my door if I try to do that. But like, there's probably nothing more precious in the world to a parent than their child. So to leave them unattended outside because you trust the society that much that this is normal and it's not a problem and no one's going to harm your child. Like, it's another moment where I remember kind of standing there and being like, where are the, like, I literally was like, where are the parents? Like, are they like doing something like, just like, I literally was like, where are the parents? Like, I didn't understand it. I really didn't. Because it's such a weird thing to see. Like, I literally thought maybe there was a group of moms or dads or whatever hanging out in the corner watching, but like, you know, just doing their own thing or something.
See, like
it's
a sting
none.
to see who comes and grabs a kid so we can bust all the kidnappers in the country and put them all in jail at once.
It was just mind-boggling to me. Like, would you do that right now? Like, leave your 2.5-year-old in the stroller just outside?
Well, no, for a variety of reasons. Some of them nothing to his safety. He would be like, no, but he would have his own opinion. But you know, Ellen, one of the things, and I have seen pictures of this, and I think it is fascinating. Besides the idea, like, wow, this country is safe, which would generate happiness for most people. The fact that you know that would not be a thing. It's like places where you go, oh, you just leave your door unlocked here. That would create some happiness because you go, oh, you don't have to think about it, which is not a thing that people who live in big cities, I would assume you lock your doors in Toronto. You I mean, New York City, like you have locks and you have another lock and then you have a chain lock. Yeah. But one of the things I picked up in that too, that's so interesting, if we go back to the happiness framework, is that story implies that the parents have needs as well.
Yes.
And that their needs can be there. And I forget which S it is. It's one of the sustainability of like, wow, I'm a parent. And as a fellow parent, we know that being a parent, you do give up some things. But like, oh, social and sustainability. Oh, I'm a parent, but I'm also going to be able to have this thing that very likely I did before I had children. And they're going to be okay. And I'm going to be okay. And I get my adult time. And then I get to go out and have them. And so you don't have to give up as much of yourself.
Yeah.
Then that goes back to the autonomy.
Yep. You nailed it. It's like literally the thoughts that I had in my head. It was like, it's about the safety of the child and the environment that you live in. But it also means that parents' needs are taken care of, because it is very difficult as a parent right now to sit down and have a brunch somewhere, because if you're attending to a child at your brunch table, you are not actually enjoying your brunch. I'm sorry. Like you know what I mean? No, like my child is pretty good. But like,
and also, if you have any friends who don't have kids, they're not going to be your friends for long. If you bring your kid to brunch and they don't love your kid,
it's true. So
they're like, oh, your daughter's so adorable. Now is the babysitter coming to take her away, or
even if the best behaved, quote unquote behaved child, like you still need to attend to them, right? And so you don't get that sense of that. Oh, people are like, oh, self-care and whatever. I'm like, I'm sure it's important, but like, you got to build it into my ecosystem. Otherwise, how am I supposed to do this self-care? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's wrap up today with, I know you have something for the audience. I'm curious, you know, I really love to end my episodes with like actionable things. People listen. I mean, first of all, they can do actions like, please connect with Ellen. You can tell she's amazing, but also like somebody's listening, like, you know what? I would say almost everybody wants more happiness. I'm really going to speak to the people that are listening. They're like, oh man, I'm just not really connected to being happy right now. What's a place that people can start?
I'm actually going to provide a resource for your audience. It's a guide. It's called the 9 Essential Questions to Ask for a Happier Life. And so it breaks down the framework that we just talked about. It gives you one question to start pondering about that particular pillar, and then an action step that you can take. So I would recommend people take a look at this, go through the pillars, see which one you feel like you want to put some attention to right now, and then take that action step associated with that question and see if you start to feel like your energy shifts into elevating your happiness.
Yeah. Ellen, this is so funny. I'm like, oh, this probably sounds like I was totally set up for this little pitch for the thing. But the truth is, like, this is not a setup. Everybody listening, this is not a setup at all. I have not seen this new material that you have. I was like, oh, like Ellen's going to give us some advice. I'm like, oh, actually, she's going to give us a 9-step part of her framework, and it asks you one question, which is brilliant because people don't want. One thing that makes me very unhappy is having to answer about 50 questions on anything. When I hear one question, I go, oh, I cannot wait to do this. That makes me happy that it's one question and I can get value from one question. Yay. Productivity. And there it is, productivity. without having to have it be something specific. Ellen, amazing conversation. Thank you so much. Thanks for doing the good work out there. Yeah, where else can people connect with you and find you and see you, hear more about what you're doing?
Yeah, Instagram is probably one of my main platforms where I share a lot of information and sort of
Which is
stories
ironic.
Around happiness. Yeah. Hey, I actually think
no, it's
social
funny because
media
yeah.
So I know where you're going. Social media is an extreme force. It can be an extreme force for good if we choose to use it that way. So Instagram is definitely somewhere where I share a lot around just happiness and stories around that. LinkedIn is also a place that I'm quite active on. So if people want to connect with me on there, and I'll send you the information.
Yeah.
To connect with.
Put that in there. I was just listening to a podcast with Armchair Expert with Allison Roman. I don't know if you know her. She was a chef. She got caught up in a controversy around the cancel culture stuff on another podcast, Reply All. She's New York Times. I don't know if you know Allison. I really like her stuff, but they were talking about this, how she always related herself, which is a very normal person, and then she's getting this vitriol around the cancel culture, and like independent of what you think about her, the fact that social media just became a hellscape because people go on there and was like, it is not the thing that made, especially if you're in a place that's that. And I don't remember if she said this or somebody said, they go, the thing with social media is you're comparing people's best with your reality.
Yep.
Unless your brand is very authentic, but even then your brand authenticity, I'm like, really? So I love that you said Instagram, because I do follow you. I see your stuff and it's very authentic, and it's like meant to generate happiness, but it's be thoughtful about it. Not like Ellen's out here with her stroller in front, or her daughter's so perfect and she's having brunch and her daughter's it's not a picture of Ellen and her daughter with all of her friends, like ladies brunching with her daughter being perfect. No. Because that would not be authentic, is my guess. Unless if you figured out how to have a 3.5-year-old be perfect at a brunch for a couple hours with adults, we're going to have you back on, and we're going to expand your business into parenting coaching as well, because that would be an incredible thing that people would pay a lot of money for.
I have not figured that one out. I'll let you know if I do. But yeah, I think, it is one of the pillars of happiness, right? Living an authentic life. And I think authenticity is.
It is.
It's great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ellen. Really enjoyable to have you on, make this happen. We'll have you come back on and talk more about this. It's obviously, in my opinion, one of the most important topics. Keep up the good work with your daughter. That's really inspiring that she's asking about mommy's feelings. I need to work on that with our kids. They're really into their feelings.
Yeah, my daughter is too, but she's learning. She's learning to pause and ask about mine too. So
she's learning. She's learning. Yeah, Ellen, thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason.
Yep. Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.